Okay, my goodness. How long does it take for them to pray? Are they coming in now? SunnahFollower. We're going to start, guys, as soon as the brothers come in from praying. That's a long prayer. SunnahFollower. Okay, guys, they said give them 10, 15 more minutes. So, okay. Let me turn my camera on for a minute. While they're doing it, I can test my stuff. Hold on here. How do I turn my camera on? Okay. Okay, hold on. I'm not going there. I'm not testing my camera. Okay, let me see something. Oh, Lord, how do I work that? Let me figure out how to work this while I'm waiting on them. Oh, okay. Now this is me. This should go back to them. Okay, just give us a few seconds, guys. The brothers are finishing up their prayer. He said 10, 15 more minutes. I don't know why it takes so long to pray. But 10 or 15 more minutes, okay? And just to remind everyone, we do have the Call In and Ask Sister Layla live show tonight. That's at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please make sure that you guys will have your questions ready. I hope we have questions this week too. We had some pretty good ones last week. And in between the Q&A, inshallah, I will speak about tips from the Quran and the Sunnah, how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us to handle the broken heart. A lot of us go through heartaches, relationships. It's a part of life. You marry someone and you think you're going to spend the rest of your life with that person and it doesn't work out. Or perhaps there is someone that you thought you were going to marry. Something happens and it doesn't work out. I mean, this is life. Life is a big roller coaster. It goes up and down, up and down. So how do we get over these type of heartaches? That's what we're going to be speaking about tonight in between my answering your questions about Islam. So make sure you guys like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and share with everyone our schedules. And let them know that this is great for the sisters, all those sisters out there grieving over a broken heart. This is the Q&A you want to be a part of, inshallah. And also, guys, just to remind everyone too, you can go to my website at www.sunnahfollowers.net and you'll find a daily schedule of all the classes. Also at www.sunnahfollowers.net, you can click on live stream and you can watch the classes live from my Sunnah Followers website. Or you can click on the link that says Zoom room, and that will bring you into the Zoom room where you can participate with us live. Our Zoom room is open 24 hours. We're always here. If you want to talk about something or to see what goes on behind the scenes at Sunnah Followers, everything happens in that Zoom room. So that way you can be a part of our community behind the scenes, our community of sisters behind the scenes. And also at sunnahfollowers.net, you can click on the tab that says donate. And I want to remind everybody, we are desperately in need of donations. This is a nonprofit organization. We are a tax-exempt nonprofit organization. All your donations go to cover our website expenses, which amount to $2,000 per month, which is, they say, is not much for a website. So please support us. In fact, it's almost the first. We were $18 overdrawn. Would have been more had it not been from the donations that we received yesterday that covered the programs that came out yesterday. So please, guys, we need your donations. You can scan the QR code there, and or you can go to the Sunnahfollowers.net website and click on make a donation, or you can just go directly to PayPal, PayPal me/Sunnahfollowers and donate, or you can Zelle us. You can Zelle too. Oh, here they are. They're here. So let me close my screen up.
Walaikum.
Walaikum salam. You guys are ready. Let me put myself down.
Okay. What she said? Come again?
Yes. Okay. You can start whenever you're ready. We're ready.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to start. All right.
And once you cue that, I'll be ready to go. Just double checking. Okay, hello. Hi, it's going to be weird tonight. This is the first time I've been here where the chair to my right is empty, so it's always going to be like me wanting to look over here and see him here, but Sheikh Ibrahim, unfortunately, he's not going to be here tonight or next week, I don't think. He's got commitments down in Florida, so inshallah, I will be back in the coming weeks, but I'm going to have to get over that psychological aspect. He's always sitting here next to me. So I'd like to say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh for everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I ask Allah tonight for strength, for guidance, clarity of thought to convey this very, very important message. Because part of this new series, I talked about it last week, that we're working on here is, part of it is preparing Muslims to be able to handle challenges and debate questions that inevitably are going to be thrown at them. Now in this modern day world, you can turn on YouTube. I talked about last week some kind of very disheartening statistics where we looked at Muslims are leaving the deen. And then we see some stats, anywhere between 75 to 80% of reverts are leaving Islam within 2 years. And we're losing the internet war. Our opponents don't mind lying. We obviously do not. Our opponents have a lot more money behind them, and they're a lot more advanced in this field. So what I wanted to do was just piece by piece kind of put together a series that's going to equip us, with some knowledge and some skills, which are going to be very useful in the coming years. As inevitably you're going to hear these attacks, and you need to know the challenges. So tonight, I'm going to give a tribute, obviously, to Prophet Ishmael, not only to Prophet Ishmael, but to anyone around the world who has been misrepresented, who has been portrayed in an unfair way. Because tonight we are going to shed light on who Prophet Ishmael was. We are going to look at the biblical accounts. We are going to see clear contradictions and errors and mistakes and outright slanderous, accusations and charges against Prophet Ishmael. We are going to clean that up and defend his honor tonight. Because there's an old saying, history is written by the winners. And you see how they're writing the Palestinian narrative, now in the mainstream media. If things are not changed in 50 to 100 years, people will say, oh, those bad Palestinians and the innocent Israelis. Because he who controls the present controls the future and the past. So I dedicate this tonight to anyone who's been slandered, who's been misrepresented, and we are going to shed light and present the truth. Now, we've opened up, obviously, with the old Quranic challenge, that the Quran is the criteria, between the Injil and the Old Testament. What we always do as Muslims is we always line something up with the Quranic account, because it's acknowledged by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala many times in the Quran that there are errors in these books. We find several different ways in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that they had done this. One, they changed the text, outright changing. We are going to see plenty of examples tonight of what I believe is 100% bona fide evidence of them doing that. You see them omit things. They take things out, when they were modifying and editing the text. You see them adding things in to satiate their desires. You can see this heavily in the modern day New Testament. You can see misinterpretations of text. So you can see corruptions overall of the Torah, the Injil, and the books going on in several ways, all fitting certain agendas to rewrite history, to satiate their desires, to portray certain events in a favorable light to those who wrote the book. It's common knowledge in the scholar community that these books have been written by several men over time. We have fragments that can prove that certain texts of what they were 300 BC were not what they were 100 BC. You can see numerous editions. We're not going to go into all that tonight, but just as a preface. So let's start off, Prophet Ishmael. That's where we are going to begin. In Deuteronomy 21, verse 15, verse 7, I'm going to define what birthright meant in the old Hebrew culture as we move on. Most people have heard throughout ancient accounts of the esteem of the firstborn inheritance, the firstborn with the blessing, the firstborn being the apple of their parents' eye, so to speak. This was a big part of traditional Hebrew culture. And we see it come to light here. If a man has two wives, and he loves one but not the other, and both bear him sons, but the firstborn is of the son of the wife he does not love. So you have a bad family situation being defined here. You can see clearly one of the men doesn't like this wife as much as he likes this one, but what the revelation goes on, if he wills his property to his sons, he must not give the rights of the firstborn to the son of the wife he has preference for over his actual firstborn. So we see clearly here in Deuteronomy, the firstborn given this precedence, this favor, high esteem. Whether you're Christian, whether you're Jewish, or you're Muslim, you acknowledge first and foremost who the firstborn of Prophet Ibrahim was. There's no debate. Even their books completely align with the Quranic and the Hadiths, that Ishmael, without a doubt, is the firstborn. I want us to keep that in mind later. Now, one thing they have done to try to take away his birthright or to diminish him, one is they say he's illegitimate, that this came from a non-marriage. This came from Ibrahim and a concubine. We are going to go into that right here. You see in Genesis 16, 2-3. And Sarai said unto Abram at the time, Abraham became the title later on in the Bible, meaning he'd be the father of many nations. But at this point, that has not happened. So you're seeing he's still going by the name of Abram. The Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go to my maid. It must be that I obtain children by her. Now I'm going to stop right there. This is another custom of the Hebrews. Nowadays, people have surrogate mothers and all kinds of sperm donors and other kinds of ways to have children if one of the particular parents is conceiving. In these days, what was a common practice was the man would marry the bondswoman, the house servant, or the slave of his wife. And they would have a child together, and then that child would go then to the wife. And it would be considered exactly like anyone else's child. It would get the same rights as the firstborn. So Sarai, was her name at the time, took Hagar, her Egyptian maid, and gave her to her husband to be, and I quote, his wife. So we see here in Genesis also outlining that Hagar became the wife of Ibrahim. So this was not illegitimate by any means. This was a marriage that took place and a child was born. So we're going to preface off there, and now we're going to move on to some of the kind of meat of the biblical accounts. So you can find the stories of Hagar and Ishmael in Genesis 16 and 21. In those two books, it chronicles the life, the story that I'm going to be going over. So that's where the reference material is going to be for this. So, of course, we have the backdrop. Ibrahim is 86 years old, his wife around a similar age. They have no children. Ibrahim, of course, as we know from our Quran, was not a Christian. He was not a Jew. He was someone who had a relationship with the Creator. He was the highest of men in terms of stature. We're going to look at that as we go forward for some of the slanderous things they have ascribed to him as we move forward. So, of course, you have two parents who are upset. They don't have children. Back then, it was always blamed on the woman, whether or not it was the woman's fault. And all, sorry, ladies, unfortunately, is how it was. Sometimes it could be the male, as we've learned in modern day technology. But Ibrahim and Sarai were upset. they wanted to have a child. As we talked about, what ended up going on was she had a bondswoman by the name of Hagar and would agree for this to happen. So what happened was he married her, and he got her pregnant, pretty much. And Hagar, according to the text in the Old Testament, started to become arrogant. She started to become boastful. She looked at herself as equal, to Sarai. Sarai, or Sarah, did not like that, obviously, and began to complain to Ibrahim. He said, this woman views herself as my equal. She must go. So what we find was Hagar, in the biblical accounts, she flees because of the abusive treatment that she was receiving by her master. She's laying alone in the desert, and she's weeping. She's crying. She's now pregnant at this point, and feels like, I guess, pretty much there's no answers. What am I going to do? How is my situation? What's my relationship going to be with Abraham? The angel of the Lord comes. We assume Jibreel. There's no name obviously given. And he tells her to go back and submit. And then something key. You'll find this in Genesis chapter 16, verses 11 and 12. You are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your misery. That's what Ishmael translates to in the Hebrew language. Basically, your Lord has heard. So it's obviously a title of a blessing. You have the EL in the middle. I've talked about this in previous lectures, where you see Michael, Jibriel, you see all the L following at the end. Now it continues. He will be a donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone against him, and he will be in hostility towards his brothers. Now let's stop here for a second. The angel of the Lord sees a woman in distress. He comes, he promises her a blessing. He says, you're going to have a son. The Lord has. And proceeds allegedly to describe this man as a donkey of a man. Now there's other translations that are actually much worse, than this. I chose to use a clean one. You could see again, his hand will be against everyone. So here you see the text is implying, again, he's going to be a warmonger. He is going to be someone who's hostile. He's going to be fighting everyone. He's going to be a wild ass of a man, is what they use in some of the other translations. So is that something that is, befitting of our Creator and his angels, to tell a pregnant woman who is weeping from misery, seeking comfort in her Lord, to say, yes, you will have a son, but he's going to have those qualities? I think all of us, we see some brothers here laughing, and that's really exactly what it is. Because we can see right here there is slander going on. Oh, it's going to get much worse. As we're really going to unpack this, we are going to see there's several hands in the text, and each hand didn't know what the other one was doing, and you find it going in a variety of different places. So again, Ishmael meaning God will hear. Now, when Ishmael was born, I want you to keep this number in mind, because it's going to be very relevant here in a few minutes. Ibrahim was 86 years old. So he's 86 when Ishmael is born. Keep that in mind. We're going to come later. So when Ibrahim becomes 99, this is when our Quran mentions this incident as well. His title went from Abram to Abraham, because he would be the father, as it's translated, of multitudes, of many nations. Here in this designation, which of course still rings true today. This is when the covenant was established between Abraham and Allah, the circumcision. So he's 99 years old. There's a very detailed, several passages you'll find it in Genesis where God is recommending to him to get circumcised. He's outlining the command for all males, starting with his firstborn son to be circumcised. So Ibrahim, God bless him, circumcised himself at the age of 99. He circumcised his son Ishmael, because he's 99 now. He was 86 when Ishmael was born, so we put Ishmael at 13. So a 13-year-old boy also being manually circumcised, by his father at this age. So coming on from that, you see also in Genesis 20, you see the blessing comes. So you have, I will make him into a great nation. So we see this coming. Well, earlier on, we learned in a prior chapter that he was going to be a donkey of a man. I mean, if you're a donkey of a man, hardly are you going to fit the criteria of a great nation. So we see already a minor contradiction, pretty big contradiction actually going on here. You know, what is it? Is he what they describe, the angel said to Hagar? Or basically, is it what God is saying now, that I will make him into a great nation? Now, Christians will say you're taking it out of context, that this is because Abraham invoked God for the blessing, but the angel gave the destiny of Ishmael in the previous one. So it is definitely a contradiction of the text. So at 100 years old, just 1 year later, Abraham would have Isaac. So he's now 100, which would make Ishmael 14. So again, we're going to keep those numbers in mind. So a child is weaned typically at 2 years to 3 years. We have this Islamically. So Ishmael, they talk about here Isaac being weaned, and Ishmael was mocking the ceremony. Abraham had had a big feast and a festival to commemorate Isaac. They had a big party, all these things. Ishmael was being a kind of antagonist. He was disturbing the peace. He was mocking. So for the final time, Sarah, known as this time, tells Ibrahim, please remove the slave girl from my presence. Take her and her son and basically get rid of them. Now, this is a father of a child who's now a teenager, who is 14. And we're told that he just cast them out outside of Beersheba, where he was living at the time. So this is where you find it really gets strange, to say the least. In Genesis 21:15, she put the boy under the bushes. This is immediately following the boy. He's 14. Actually, if you add in 2 years for weaning, he's actually 16 years old at this point. She put the boy under the bushes. He was 16 years old. Again, mind you, God heard the boy crying. Don't be afraid. God has heard the boy crying. Lift him up, for I will make him into a great nation. So we see that being repeated again. Then God opened her eyes, and behold, there was the well. There was the well, in which she could basically provide that much necessary water, being stranded out in the middle of the desert. Now, this all to Muslims is a bit different, because it's 100% different in almost every way to our Quranic narrative of exactly what happened. And we find that in a hadith in Sahih Bukhari. So you see here, 16-year-old boy being put by his mother in the bushes, while the mother is frantically chasing after water to feed him or to nurture him. It would have obviously been the other way. Even in modern day society, where young men don't really become men until they're 30, unfortunately, in some cases. Back then, if you were 10, you were 11, you were 12, you were skilled in archery, you were probably skilled in sword, hand to hand, you knew how to hunt, you traveled with the males in the family, and you grew up very quickly. Life expectancy for some was long, for some was short. So we already have a big problem here with the authorship in the Old Testament, because you have a 16-year-old boy being wrote about as if he was a child, when clearly we see 86 was when Ishmael was born, 100, Isaac was born, 2 years he was weaned, give or take. You have a 16-year-old boy being described as a child, 16-year-old teenager, I should say. Now, we know from the Islamic narrative, when we look at this, you see basically Ibrahim was commanded at Sarah's request. So you do find the similarities there between the two. You see, Sarah requesting, but in the Quranic text, not the Quran, I'm sorry, the Sahih Bukhari from our Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, is described as something that happened early on. He was still a baby at this point. And Sarah wanted to get rid of, Hagar. So when Ibrahim took Hagar down to what is present day Mecca, Hagar questioned, Ibrahim, why are you doing this? You took me from the lush, beautiful, windy areas of Palestine, and you stuck me down here with nothing. Did your God ask you to do this? To which Ibrahim promptly replied, yes. So Ibrahim basically knew, of course, he was guided. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had told him to place her in that area. So we, of course, know as it goes from there. She's left here to fend for herself with a small child, not a human being in sight. She's scrambling between what we now know as Safa and Marwa, chasing, trying to find, there might be a mirage here. Let me go run and check it 7 times, back and forth, frantically, as a mother would, trying to keep her young child alive. Until finally the angel Jibreel takes his wing and uncovers the Zamzam, well. And then, of course, the story goes on as the Zamzam well flowed and flowed and flowed, as it still is to this day, mashallah. The birds started flying above. Then some people known as the tribe of Jurham, they saw this birds over there, what's going on. They came over. And all of a sudden, they approached Hajar, can we use this well? Which he kindly agreed. And then civilization took place in Mecca. So when you go from the makes no sense, whatsoever. You have a teenager, a father abandoning his children, his wife, who he had been with now at this point for 16 years, just throwing her away, versus basically the Quranic account, the Hadith account, the account of our Messenger, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which is stating that Allah had given him a calling to do this. Now, the thing when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks you to do something, obviously, is we compare to our own lives. Sometimes it don't make any sense to us. We don't have that ability to see past what's going on now to see what's going on down the line. By Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sending them, look what we have today. We have the most blessed place on earth. We have a place visited by millions of people, a place that you couldn't even find on a map 2,000 years ago. Now has more visitors, more people than any place in the world. SubhanAllah. When you really think about it. But that was, again, part of what the Islamic message is opposed to the biblical message. You also get to the point of the sacrifice. There is some dispute here as well, where you have in the Quranic account, it's clearly Isaac, who is the one that God asked Ibrahim as a test to sacrifice his son. Where you see basically in the Old Testament, you find the words, the Lord your God will raise up, sorry, I went out of sequence there, read my own writing here. You'll see, take your son, your only son, who you love, Isaac. So we see here that we find this basically in Genesis 22, verse 2, that God is saying to Ibrahim, take your only son, the one you love, meaning you don't care about that other one. You only love him. Again, this contradicts every aspect of the firstborn narratives that we get from traditional Hebrew culture. They're making us believe here that Abraham is one of the worst human beings on the face of the earth. He throws his wife and child out, doesn't care about them. In the Quranic narrative, he goes and visits. In fact, later on, he visited Ishmael several times, and they would build the Kaaba. We're going to talk about the similarities in another talk between the Kaaba and the Holy of Holies of the Jewish temple. And you can see that the same architect, the same concept was present originally back then that would come later. Again, consistency in some aspects of the revelation, the similarities between the design of the original Kaaba and the Holy of Holies, which the Jews had built in Jerusalem. So you have this dilemma here. So why are they doing this? Why are they wanting to go to all these lengths to cover it up, to delegitimize him? And after this, in the Genesis account, you don't hear Ishmael mentioned at all. His future, what he became, nothing. He just pretty much disappears. Because they've got a little problem, here. And Christians don't like this. They've tried the best they can in several debates to kind of wiggle around it. You find this in Deuteronomy 18. This is a very famous prophecy. In fact, it is immortalized in our Holy Quran when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala references that the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was mentioned in their scriptures. And they are denying. Why are they denying it? Let's see what the words say. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me. This is Musa speaking. So Musa is saying to the Israelites, your Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your fellow Israelites. And I will put my words in his mouth. He will tell them everything that I command. So God is saying, literally, this prophet, I will put my words into his mouth. Who fits that description? Now, the Christians obviously will say it's Jesus. But according to the Christians, he's not a prophet. He's the Son of God. He's literally God in the flesh in some Christian sects. So obviously this cannot be referring to Jesus because he's not a prophet. He's the Messiah. By even the Christians who believe that Jesus was human, they still say he's the Messiah, not refer to him as the prophet. So what the prophet obviously fits the description of having literally the words of God placed into his mouth, who doesn't speak from his own desire, speaks only the word of Allah. And we, of course, know the answer to that. So how do they disqualify Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from this statement? By delegitimizing Ishmael. Because the common argument is that, oh, he was a descendant from Ishmael. That doesn't count. You know, the bloodline came through Isaac. Anyone who knows anything about Hebrew culture, the tribal affiliation comes from the father. If your father was from the tribe of Judah, Dan, didn't matter. That's what tribe you were affiliated with. Going back even before the 12 tribes of Israel, Ibrahim, obviously, his sons were from his bloodline. So needless to say, Ishmael is the inheritor of that bloodline, of that right, of that divine right of prophethood. So this fits in absolutely perfectly because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was from their brethren. He was from that bloodline, but they didn't want to accept him. They felt that he was beneath them. This has to be a Jew from Isaac, cannot be someone from Ishmael. Anyone have any questions or comments? Feels weird when Sheikh's not here to add something. I need to take a drink. But I want everyone to kind of get a good, clear picture. And as we're going to go through in the coming weeks, we are going to start covering the New Testament. And it gets a lot worse. Because we as Muslims, we take for granted that we have the Book of Allah. We have a book without contradiction. People have to try to make up stuff to try to find us or trap us. You can say in a debate with this, I mean, it's literally, it's all over the place. You really get the feel when you study the Torah that it's written by 10, 15 different people, sometimes within the same chapter, that it really just kind of jumps. And we're seeing evidence again of that tonight. The way you have in one hand, he's 86 years old, he has his son, then he's 100, then his son all of a sudden goes back in time, like back in the past, and becomes a boy again, then he's forgotten. I mean, it just really, it makes no sense. And again, testifies to the Quran's purpose is to clean this stuff up. It's to provide the clarification on that which they differ. You know, we are going to see going forward when we start talking about Isa, on who be peace, the same thing. You know, he came out simply as a man with a message, follow God, worship God. As he says in Matthew, I came to confirm the law, not to abolish it. And then just a few decades later, he's, walking, talking God. You know, he's literally God in the flesh. So you can see again how those stories can morph and change over time. But Ishmael, without him, we don't have Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So as Muslims, I recommend everyone to become familiar with the life of Ishmael. I've given you the biblical accounts. There are very few, as I mentioned, just 2 major points in Genesis do we find these. But he's kind of been forgotten, you know, and lost. And I mean, he is very important. We look at the grand scheme of things of who we are. Because without him in that barren place, thousands of years ago, you know, Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is never born. You know, it's all part of God's miraculous, beautiful plan, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set everything up. You know, from back then, what seemed hopeless became the biggest, you know, sense of hope that ever could be given. You know, the city of Mecca. So that's conclude basically tonight. Anyone have any questions, comments, anything you would like to add? So usually when Sheikh Ibrahim's here, we have a little bit extra time. So. Sunnah followers, any questions, comments? I don't know. Can they hear me? Oh, she's giving a thumbs up. So we don't have any comments from anyone, questions? Oh, she's good. Okay, because we want, again, main purpose tonight was just to get everybody to be a little bit more familiar, you know, with their deen, familiar with some of the slanders and where they come from and what we have to do to combat that. So from now on, we start hearing challenges to Deuteronomy, you know, 18, verse 14 and 15. We simply say to those people, who's really the firstborn? How does the Hebrew lineage work? Ishmael is obviously the firstborn. The Hebrew lineage work. The firstborn is elevated. You get your descendancy from your father. You cannot take away that, from him. You cannot steal his birthright, which is what the authors, obviously, of this present day Torah, not the Torah revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the present day authors, the most modern authors have ascribed to him. So if nobody has any questions, bid everybody a farewell. Good night. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We thank everybody for coming. And inshallah, we'll see you next week where we are going to look at the 90 plus contradictions in the New Testament. That's going to be a little bit longer than tonight. We're not going to go through all 90 of them because we'd be here for 5 hours really to go through them. But we're going to focus on the more larger ones, some of the more glaring contradictions. And I don't want to see any Muslims or hear any stories of any Muslims losing their faith because they hear a couple of YouTube videos and they hear some stuff that they never heard their imam talking about from someone who's versed in the Torah or the New Testament, and they believe, all my life I've been told lies. No, he's got to be prepared for who the giver of the information, is, so to speak. But have a good night. Allah bless.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jazakallah khair.